Late one night, long after everyone had left the Gates Foundation office, Bill Gates sat alone at his desk, surrounded by silence so thick it felt like it had weight. The hum of the city outside barely touched the stillness inside the glass-walled room. He was staring at his laptop, the blue glow reflecting in his tired eyes. A blank email waited on the screen. A single blinking cursor taunting him with the question he didn't know how to ask. For a man who had spent a lifetime solving problems, this one was different. After a long breath, he began typing, slowly, deliberately, "I need help. This message is urgent." He paused, staring at those words, reading them again and again as if trying to decide whether they truly belonged to him. He had written thousands of emails in his life, business plans, philanthropic updates, letters to world leaders, but never something so human, so vulnerable. He didn't even know who he was writing to. The world? Himself? Maybe both. For years, he had been the man who gave answers. The man people called when they needed change. But now, sitting under the faint light of his desk lamp, he realized he had questions that money couldn't answer. He closed his eyes, and memories rushed back. The faces of children he'd met in rural Africa, the smile of a farmer in India, the wrinkled hands of an old woman who had once thanked him not for money, but for hope. "You brought us water," she had told him. "But what we really need is faith, in each other." That sentence had stayed with him like a ghost he couldn't shake off. He had traveled the world, built empires, created change, and yet tonight, he felt powerless. It wasn't failure that haunted him. It was emptiness, the quiet ache that comes when you realize impact without connection feels hollow. He leaned back, sighed, and whispered to himself, "Maybe it's not the world that's broken. Maybe it's us." He saved the email as a draft and turned off his laptop, but sleep didn't come that night. His thoughts wandered endlessly, through the noise of headlines, the endless meetings, and the growing distance between technology and humanity. 2 weeks earlier, he had visited a small Kenyan village where one of his projects had installed clean water filters. He remembered how the children had danced around the taps as clear water flowed for the first time. But later that evening, an elderly villager approached him and said, "You gave us water. But what about hope?" Those words had cut deep, and tonight, they returned louder than ever. Hope. He had always believed hope came from progress, but what if progress had outpaced compassion? The next morning, as the sun rose, he reopened his laptop and stared at the draft email again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before finally hitting send. The message went out to millions of subscribers who had once signed up for updates about his work. The subject line read, "This is urgent." Inside was a single sentence, "If you're reading this, I need your help. Something in our world is breaking, and I can't fix it alone." Within hours, the internet exploded. News agencies ran the headline, "Bill Gates sends urgent message to the world." Millions began speculating, was it a new disease? An environmental threat? A personal crisis? But Bill wasn't talking. He ignored interviews, stayed silent, and let the message breathe. What he didn't expect, however, was what came next. Among the flood of emails and letters that poured in, one message stood out, a handwritten letter from a 15-year-old girl in India named Meera. She wrote, "Mr. Gates, we have one broken computer in our school that doesn't work, but our teacher told us about you. You said once that every problem has a solution. Maybe what you need isn't help. Maybe you need to believe again." Bill read that line over and over. Believe again. For years, he had believed in numbers, models, systems. But when had he stopped believing in people? That one letter made him realize something profound. The world didn't need another billionaire savior. It needed someone willing to listen. So, he did something he hadn't done in years. He invited ordinary people into the conversation. Scientists, artists, doctors, farmers, teachers, and students joined a private virtual call he hosted. There was no formal agenda, no PowerPoint, no speeches. Just voices, real, unfiltered voices. Bill began the meeting quietly, saying, "I sent that message because I thought the world had stopped caring. But maybe I was the one who stopped listening." A teacher from Brazil spoke next. "Mr. Gates, we don't need perfection. We need someone to remind us we still matter." A nurse in Nigeria added, "We need compassion." For the next 3 hours, the discussion flowed. Laughter, stories, tears. Bill took notes silently, his heart growing heavier and lighter at the same time. When the call ended, he sat in his office, staring at the city skyline. Realizing that for the first time in a long while, he had felt connected, not as a billionaire, but as a human being. That night, he opened his email again and continued typing beneath his first message. Not help to build more systems, not help to make more money, but help to rebuild the human spirit. If every person reading this message performs one kind act today, unseen, unpaid, unshared, maybe we can start healing faster than we ever imagined. He pressed send again. This time, the message wasn't just his, it belonged to everyone. This time, the message wasn't just his, it belonged to everyone. Within 24 hours, the world began to change in small, quiet ways. A bakery in London started giving free bread to the homeless. A student in Japan wrote anonymous notes saying, "You matter," and left them in library books. A nurse in Mexico began volunteering on weekends for people who couldn't afford care. Soon, the hashtag One Kind Act began trending worldwide. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people started posting about the simple kindnesses they had witnessed or done. And in the middle of it all, Bill Gates stayed silent. He didn't appear on camera, didn't release a statement. He just watched. For the first time, he felt like his message had reached where no technology could, into the quiet corners of the human heart. One night, he received a message from the same village elder in Kenya who had once told him that people needed hope. The message said, "You once gave us water. Now you have given us hope." Bill smiled for the first time in weeks. He realized that he hadn't started a movement, he had simply reminded the world that kindness still works. Months later, in a live interview, a journalist asked him, "Mr. Gates, why did you send that urgent message? What kind of help were you asking for?" Bill smiled thoughtfully before replying, "It wasn't about saving the world. It was about reminding myself, and everyone else, that we still can." The interviewer pressed further, "So, did you get the help you needed?" Bill laughed gently. "Yes. Millions of people answered my message. But they didn't send me money or solutions. They sent me hope." The room went silent. Cameras kept rolling. But you could feel that this was more than an interview, it was a confession. Later that night, he took a quiet walk through a park near his home. Families were laughing, children were playing, and the autumn wind carried the sound of joy through the trees. A little boy running past him tripped and dropped his ice cream. Without thinking, Bill knelt down, helped him up, and bought him another one. The boy grinned and said, "Thanks, mister." Bill smiled and replied, "You're welcome." It was such a small moment, yet it filled him with peace he hadn't felt in years. He realized that help wasn't always about saving millions. Sometimes it was about one small act that makes one person's day a little better. That night, back home, he opened his journal and wrote a single reflection. Once, I asked for help because I thought the world was falling apart. But what I really needed was to remember that kindness still exists. The world isn't broken. It's just waiting for us to care again. He closed the journal, turned off the light, and sat for a while in the dark, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: calmness. Outside, millions of people across different countries were still doing one kind act at a time. All inspired by 6 simple words: I need help. This message is urgent. But what none of them realized was that their help had already reached him, not through replies or headlines, but through the quiet rebirth of faith in humanity. For the first time in decades, Bill Gates didn't feel like the man the world depended on. He felt like part of the world again. And that, he thought, was the greatest help anyone could ever receive.